So the seminar today had two aims. Firstly, to formally launch the Recovery Capital project, which is part of the wider Citizen Power programme in Peterborough. Lots of P's there. And the second aim was really to inform our learning about what Recovery Capital is, how you mobilise it, how you identify it, how you communicate it, how you socialise it, how you champion it, all of those things. So we were learning very much about kind of the up-to-date recovery research from David Best, who's one of the leading experts in it in the UK, but also from a grassroots organisation from Michaela Jones, who was really talking about the very practical challenges that you face when trying to set up a peer-led organisation that's focused on recovery.
For me, the whole notion of recovery capital is getting an understanding of what exists in your community. The notion that our society is a bunch of needs, and that's what we've got to work out, and that's what we've got to find out. And we know we've got a community, we know they have needs. The missing bit of information, I think, in most communities is what actually already exists and how you can best activate that capital. And I think that isn't an approach that a lot of people are taking. They're sort of putting, instead of looking and saying, well, if we link that with that and we make better use of this with this, we'll actually release the capital. What's happening is they're just putting layers over the top and creating new things. So it's kind of like a back to basics approach. What exists? How can we best use it? How can we link these things up?
Understanding of recovery capital comes very much from the works written by sort of William White, and that's coming over from the US at the moment. And it's very much about looking at the resources and assets that individuals possess, but that they also have access to through their networks and in their community. So it could be institutions, it could be community organisations, it could be schools, you know, all of those sorts of things. But also not forgetting what people have internally, so things like self-esteem, confidence, resilience, and those things that speak to the kind of the wider programme of the Citizen Power work and what we mean by a sustainable citizen.
It's always good to hear from people who are leaders in the field. I really enjoyed listening to David Best giving us real facts and figures, because that's quite often what's difficult to capture in recovery. So to be able to get some real data from studies that he's taken in Glasgow and Birmingham is fantastic, and also to hear from Michaela from how it works at a ground level is really useful for what I do in West Sussex.
Totally, they totally put it in. Well, I don't want to use a cliche, but they totally put it in the right words, right. Exactly how it is.
Right.
SUGA is service users giving advice. Right. Basically, we've all either been in treatment. If we are still in treatment, we're stable, but we've got also people that are through the other side too. We don't have anyone that's actively using, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because if you're actively using, it's a full-time job. There's nowhere in Peterborough that is doing this sort of thing, We're the only service user group, as far as we know, in 30, 40 mile radius, do you know what I mean? And there's been so much focus on script and go in the last few years, getting methadone and that's it. Everyone's got their different views, but my personal view, do you know what I mean, is that the fact is they're more interested in just stopping you doing what you're doing, and they're not really interested in the recovery. So now that they're focused on recovery, it's a really good thing.
And I think that's the thing about recovery. I think it has to be locally based. I think that's why community-led recovery organisations are so important, because I think each community will develop its organisations in a slightly different way on the basis of what people want, what people's aspirations are. So, for example, in Tameside, I think people's aspirations may well be very different to somewhere like Peterborough, for example. So instead of sort of what we need to do is be building a community that meets those aspirations, looking at the resources we've got, identifying any gaps and seeing how those gaps can be filled, but not just coming in with a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not going to work. Always go for the basic, simple approach. I would go for, I think there are communities, they're just very, very hidden, and where those communities meet is In the parks, in small groups, and what you need to do is create an environment where all those disparate bits of that community can come together, which is what we did in Tameside, largely through creating a breakfast club. And yes, people get breakfast, but they don't just come and leave. People stay, usually arrive 9-10 o'clock, and they'll stay till lunchtime, and now we've actually extended it so people can stay in the afternoon. And what we found is although there's the vast majority of people have drug and alcohol problems, we've got people with mental health problems, we've got older people, and it's just become a communal space, and it's reaching that community. Once you've built that space, that's when you can start doing the other stuff. I think it can be misunderstood on a sort of academic level, in the sense that I think someone said here, you're feeding people towards recovery, that somehow by meeting these basic needs you're actually facilitating people's use. Which to an extent, I can see that argument, but my perspective on the argument is if you meet people's basic needs, they're much more likely to engage in the next tier. So what we found is if we can feed someone, maybe give them some clean clothes, boots, whatever, then they're much more likely to start to listen about potentially coming to a smart recovery group, or perhaps thinking about volunteering or something like that. But if those basic needs aren't met, people are disengaged. If someone's got to go out to nick for their, not just to support their habit, but maybe to provide food for themselves, they're not really going to want to engage in anything else. So we believe that from those foundations we'll be able to build up. And it's not going to work all the time.
I particularly like the whole idea around getting back to basics, which Michaela was talking about. It is quite, when you're talking about something so blue sky, you think you aim high, but actually, just having maybe making a link with Dr. Martens and getting a store of boots for people to have for nothing is the way to get feet in the door, basically. That sort of is just really practical, good advice.
In Peterborough, where I'm from, there isn't a recovery community at all. There is no recovery community, so essentially people go off to residential rehab somewhere out in the country and then relocate to where they've actually done their recovery, rather than bringing their experience back home and actually then promoting that to generate the community. So yeah, the hard thing for us is to actually get that movement going and actually growing that community.
The UK recovery movement is really gathering momentum, and we're really keen that in Peterborough we help to enable this recovery community, which we think is really essential to long-term sustained recovery from substance misuse. What that means for Peterborough is that you have substance using people. They could have substance using experience, so they could be in recovery, or they could still be in treatment, or they could be at the very earliest stage of it, so they're very what we call treatment naive, so they haven't even gone into treatment. But they're collaborating with people in their wider community, so that you're not only addressing stigma, but you're actually you're working together to identify where the assets and resources are within your community that you can make best use of, which you may not otherwise have been aware of. But you can also then start to spot where the gaps are, so you can then work together to start filling those gaps. So really, by going through this mapping process with a whole range of people from the community, you're really starting to strengthen the relationships between the citizens in that community, and really help people to help themselves and help each other.